My grandmother left her entire fortune to the grandchild who truly loved her the most, so my cousins decided to eliminate the competition. I should have known something was terribly wrong when Marcus sent a message to our family group chat at 2 a.m. emergency family meeting tomorrow. Grandma Rose wants to see everyone immediately. The message felt different, urgent, desperate, filled with barely contained panic, the kind that surfaces when massive generational wealth is suddenly in play. Marcus never texted the family unless he wanted something expensive from someone, and he never called emergency family meetings unless inheritance was on the table. For context, my grandmother Rose was worth exactly $47 million. Her real estate empire spanned 3 states, with prime commercial properties. Her stock portfolio made seasoned financial advisors envious. Her jewelry collection could fund a small developing country's annual budget. Her diversified business investments generated more passive income while she slept than most people earned in a year of hard labor. She had raised 6 traumatized grandchildren after our parents died in various tragic accidents, multiple car crashes, aggressive cancers, drug overdoses that the family always pretended were accidental to preserve our social standing. The usual cursed family luck seemed to follow our bloodline like a malevolent spirit, systematically picking us off one by one until only Rose remained, strong and defiant. We used to make dark jokes about inheritance during increasingly awkward family dinners, creating morbid humor about who would get which valuable assets when Rose finally passed on. But Rose had this terrifying way of looking directly into your soul, making your spine tingle and your carefully constructed lies wither in your throat. It was like she had a supernatural ability to see through your facade to the real person underneath all the pretense. Rose had survived the brutal Great Depression by eating garbage scraps and sleeping in freezing abandoned buildings. She built an impossible business empire from nothing but raw determination and ruthless intelligence. She had zero tolerance for weakness, excuses, self-pity, or anything that resembled whining about life being unfair. Starting with just a borrowed $20 and unshakable determination, she bought distressed properties during the worst economic collapse in American history. By the time the economy recovered, she owned half the commercial real estate in 3 major cities. Her business philosophy was simple but brutal. Trust no one completely, verify everything twice, and always have 3 backup plans because people inevitably disappoint you. That ominous morning, we gathered solemnly in her intimidating Victorian mansion's formal parlor like guilty suspects in a classic Agatha Christie murder mystery, waiting for the detective's final revelation. The hand-polished mahogany furniture gleamed menacingly under expensive imported crystal chandeliers. Generations of stern family portraits stared down at us with cold, disapproving dead eyes, judging our corrupt souls and finding us wanting. The room itself was a testament to Rose's success. Persian rugs worth more than most people's houses, first-edition books lining floor-to-ceiling shelves, and artwork that belonged in museums. Marcus, 28, the insufferable golden boy who graduated from Harvard Business School summa cum laude and never let anyone forget his academic superiority. He worked at a prestigious investment firm specializing in hostile corporate takeovers, essentially destroying companies for profit while wearing expensive suits and pretending it was for the greater good of capitalism. Sarah, 26, the predatory shark lawyer who specialized in hostile corporate acquisitions and calculated legal destruction. She had never visited Rose voluntarily unless she desperately needed emergency money for her expensive cocaine habit or mounting gambling debts from underground high-stakes poker games where she regularly lost thousands of dollars to criminals who didn't accept credit cards. Twin brothers Jake and Luke, 24, had already blown through their substantial 6-figure trust funds on luxury sports cars, designer drugs, and month-long Las Vegas weekends costing more than most people's annual salaries. They were identical in appearance but completely different in personality. Jake was the aggressive one who solved problems with violence and intimidation, while Luke was the manipulative one who preferred psychological warfare and emotional manipulation. Both had dropped out of college multiple times and showed no signs of developing any marketable skills or work ethic. My sister Emma, 22, the genuinely sweet and innocent one who actually called Grandma Rose every Sunday to chat warmly about her week and ask detailed questions about Rose's prize-winning garden. Emma was studying to become a pediatric nurse, volunteering at children's hospitals during her free time, and somehow managing to remain optimistic despite growing up in our catastrophically dysfunctional family. She was the only one among us who seemed to have inherited Rose's genuine compassion instead of just her ruthless business instinct. And me, 25, the designated family black sheep who had been taking comprehensive care of Rose since her devastating stroke last year when everyone else claimed they were too busy with their allegedly important lives to help. I dropped out of law school to become Rose's full-time caregiver, managing her medications, driving her to doctor appointments, and listening to her stories about building her empire from nothing. Everyone assumed I was doing it for inheritance money, but the truth was simpler. Rose was the only family member who'd ever treated me like a human being instead of a disappointment. Rose sat regally in her motorized wheelchair, eyes sharp and calculating as freshly broken glass despite the constant oxygen tank that had become her unwelcome companion after the stroke damaged her lung function. Her longtime lawyer, Mr. Peterson, stood professionally beside her with official-looking legal documents that made everyone shift nervously in their expensive antique chairs. "I'm dying," she announced matter-of-factly, like casually discussing tomorrow's weather forecast or fluctuating stock market prices. 6 months maximum, maybe significantly less if these expensive doctors are correct about the aggressive cancer spreading rapidly through my organs. So I'm completely changing my will today, and I wanted you all to know immediately. The elegantly appointed room went absolutely dead silent. You could literally hear hearts stopping mid-beat, breath catching painfully in throats, mental calculators frantically computing complex inheritance divisions and potential windfall amounts. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds of pure, concentrated greed mixed with barely concealed panic. Instead of splitting everything equally among you, like you've been confidently expecting your entire privileged lives, I'm leaving my complete $47 million fortune to whichever grandchild demonstrates they love me most genuinely. She smiled, that absolutely terrifying predatory smile that had made ruthless business rivals surrender entire companies without firing a single legal shot. You have until Christmas Day, exactly 3 months from today, to prove your devotion conclusively. The announcement hit the room like a financial nuclear bomb. Marcus's face went through several color changes. From pale shock to red anger to calculating determination, Sarah immediately started taking notes on her legal pad, probably already planning her strategy to contest the will or manipulate the competition. The twins just stared at each other with identical expressions of confusion and growing panic. They'd been counting on their inheritance to fund their lifestyle indefinitely. Marcus leaned forward eagerly, already calculating potential angles like the Harvard-trained corporate shark he'd become. "How exactly do we prove love, Grandma? What are the specific measurable criteria for evaluation? Actions, not empty words. I'll be watching everything you do, everything you say, everything you think I can't see or hear." Her piercing eyes swept across us like prison searchlights hunting for escaped convicts. "The person who truly loves me will reveal themselves naturally through consistent behavior." Emma looked genuinely distressed, not about the money, but about Rose's deteriorating health. "Grandma, are you sure about this? Maybe we should just focus on spending time together instead of competing." Rose's expression softened slightly when she looked at Emma. "Sweet child, this isn't about competition. It's about truth, about seeing who people really are when money is involved." After she was carefully wheeled away for her mandatory afternoon nap by her private duty nurse, we huddled together in the massive commercial-grade kitchen like guilty conspirators planning a revolution. The entire emotional energy had shifted completely from awkward family reunion to something much darker, more dangerous, and infinitely more desperate. "This is absolutely insane," Sarah muttered frantically, pacing back and forth like a caged predator. "We should contest it immediately through probate court, get her declared mentally incompetent due to medication effects." "On what legal grounds?" Marcus asked with calculated coolness. "She's mentally sharp as ever, probably significantly sharper than any of us combined. Peterson will testify to her competency. And she just demonstrated perfect awareness of her situation." Emma looked genuinely worried, her naturally pale face becoming ghostly white. "Maybe she just wants to see us more frequently before she, passes away. Maybe this inheritance competition isn't really about money at all." "Wake up and smell reality, Emma," Jake interrupted harshly, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is about exactly $47 million in liquid assets. The game just changed completely, and there's only going to be one ultimate winner standing." Luke nodded in agreement with his twin. "We can't afford to be sentimental about this. $47 million divided by 6 is still life-changing money, but $47 million for one person, that's generational wealth." That's when I noticed the meaningful look that passed silently between Marcus and Sarah, something cold, calculating, and absolutely terrifying, like they were already mentally planning something that would make the rest of us very unhappy. Very quickly, I'd seen that look before during family arguments. It usually preceded someone getting emotionally destroyed or financially ruined. Sarah stopped pacing and pulled out her phone. "I need to make some calls, research the legal precedents for this kind of will structure. I need to review Grandma's financial portfolios," Marcus added. "Understand exactly what we're competing for." more. Over the next few days, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Everyone started visiting Rose with suspicious frequency, bringing gifts and offering help with increasingly desperate enthusiasm. The mansion, which had been quiet and peaceful during my year of caregiving, suddenly became a busy hub of fake affection and transparent manipulation. Marcus showed up every morning with expensive flowers, always roses, obviously, and insisted on helping with Rose's financial paperwork. He'd spend hours in her study, supposedly organizing her investments while actually photographing every document when he thought no one was looking. His Harvard business training made him confident he could optimize Rose's portfolio better than her current financial advisors, and he wasn't shy about sharing his opinions. Sarah arrived each afternoon with legal documents, claiming they were routine updates to protect Rose's assets from potential government seizure or tax complications. She'd spread papers across Rose's dining room table and explain complex legal concepts in a condescending tone, as if Rose hadn't been navigating business law successfully for 60 years. What Sarah didn't realize was that Rose had been recording every conversation, building her own case file of everyone's true motivations. The twins developed a sudden fascination with Rose's war stories and business empire founding history, recording everything on their expensive smartphones with professional quality audio apps. They'd sit for hours listening to Rose describe her early struggles during the Depression, asking detailed questions about her strategies and methods. What they were really doing was creating content they could sell to documentary filmmakers or biographers after Rose died, monetizing her life story for their own benefit. But Emma stopped coming to visit altogether after the first week. When I asked why during our weekly coffee date at her favorite downtown cafe, she showed me the horrifying photographs with trembling hands. Someone had been systematically following her everywhere she went. Professional quality surveillance pictures of her at work, at the grocery store, getting out of her car, walking her rescued dog around the neighborhood park, all with precise timestamps, all recent, all clearly meant to terrify her into staying completely away from Rose and the inheritance competition. "I'm genuinely scared," she admitted, hands shaking violently as she showed me image after disturbing image. "I think they're absolutely serious about physically hurting me if I don't back off permanently." The photos were professionally taken with expensive equipment, showing Emma from multiple angles and distances. Whoever had taken them had been following her for weeks, learning her routine and documenting her vulnerabilities. There were pictures of her apartment building, her workplace, even the inside of her favorite coffee shop. Someone had been studying her like a target. 2 weeks later, Emma called me at 3 a.m., sobbing hysterically into the phone. "Someone broke into my apartment tonight," she whispered, her voice shaking uncontrollably with pure terror. "They didn't take anything valuable like electronics or jewelry, but they left something behind that's much worse." "What kind of something?" I asked urgently, already grabbing my car keys and jacket. "A note, a professionally typed note that says, 'Stop visiting Grandma Rose immediately or things will get much worse for you.'" My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed molten lead. I drove straight to her apartment complex through empty streets and found her waiting terrified in the brightly lit lobby, too scared to go back upstairs alone to her violated sanctuary. The note was typed perfectly on plain white paper with no identifying marks, completely untraceable with no fingerprints or DNA evidence visible. The break-in had been professional. No forced entry, no damage to the locks, no signs of violence or ransacking. Someone with lock-picking skills had entered quietly, left their message, and disappeared without disturbing anything else. It was a precision intimidation operation designed to terrify Emma without leaving evidence that could be traced back to the perpetrators. That night, I secretly installed multiple hidden security cameras around Rose's entire property without telling anyone in the family. What I captured over the next week made my blood run completely cold with horror. The high-definition footage showed Marcus and Sarah meeting secretly in Rose's moonlit garden at exactly midnight, thinking everyone was safely asleep. I enhanced the audio quality using sophisticated software I'd learned about online and heard every single word of their chilling conversation. "Emma's still clearly the obvious favorite," Sarah was saying, cigarette smoke curling around her words like poison. "Rose's whole face lights up like Christmas morning whenever someone even mentions Emma's name. She's definitely the biggest threat to our chances. Then we need to eliminate her from the competition permanently," Marcus replied with the emotional warmth of a corporate restructuring announcement. "Remove her from the equation entirely." "What exactly are you suggesting here?" Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she already knew, "and something believable that won't point back to us legally." "You're an experienced lawyer. You know exactly how to make problems disappear completely without leaving any evidence trail. My hands were literally shaking violently as I watched my own blood cousins coldly planning to hurt innocent Emma, but their evil conversation got exponentially worse from there. What about the designated black sheep? Sarah asked, meaning me specifically. He's been taking care of her daily, doing all the medical grunt work and earning sympathy points. Rose still sees him as the family disappointment who never amounted to anything meaningful. We just need to make sure he stays that way in her mind permanently. Marcus pulled out a folder filled with documents. I've been researching his background. Law school dropout, no steady employment history, history of depression and anxiety. We can paint him as unstable and manipulative. Sarah nodded approvingly. And I've been documenting every conversation I've had with Rose about him. She's mentioned feeling sorry for him, feeling obligated to help him. We can use that to show he's taking advantage of her sympathy. They spent another hour planning their psychological warfare campaign against Emma and me, discussing specific lies they would tell Rose, evidence they would manufacture, and ways to make us look like greedy manipulators while positioning themselves as Rose's protectors. That's when I finally understood the complete bigger picture. Emma's apartment break-in, the professionally typed threatening note, the systematic surveillance photographs, they were strategically removing anyone who threatened their inheritance chances, using psychological fear and physical intimidation as calculated weapons. The next morning, I called Emma immediately and told her everything I'd discovered. We have to go to the police immediately, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks. With what concrete evidence? A recorded conversation about inheritance money. They haven't actually committed any prosecutable crimes yet being the absolutely terrifying keyword here, I made a potentially life-changing decision. Pack a bag right now. You're staying with me until this nightmare is completely over, and we're going to beat them at their own evil game. For the next month, I documented everything obsessively like a private investigator building a case. Marcus bringing expensive gifts while secretly photographing Rose's private financial documents and personal papers when she wasn't looking. Sarah having Rose sign complex legal papers that weren't really routine updates. They were systematically giving Sarah comprehensive power of attorney in case Rose became medically incapacitated. The twins weren't just sharing war stories. They were recording them with professional equipment, probably planning to sell exclusive rights to documentary filmmakers or celebrity biographers later. I also discovered they'd been conducting their own investigations into Emma's and my personal lives, looking for ammunition they could use against us. Marcus had hired a private investigator to dig up embarrassing information about my law school failure and subsequent mental health struggles. Sarah had been interviewing Emma's former employers and college friends, looking for anyone who might say something negative about her character. Meanwhile, I kept doing exactly what I'd always done naturally, helping Rose with her complex daily medication schedule, which involved 12 different prescriptions taken at specific times throughout the day, reading classic novels to her when her eyes were too tired for books. Her favorites were Victorian literature and mystery novels, especially anything by Agatha Christie, listening patiently to her stories about building her business empire from absolutely nothing, stories I'd heard dozens of times but never grew tired of hearing. Rose had an incredible memory for details even at her age. She could recall specific conversations from 50 years ago, remember the exact prices she'd paid for properties during the Depression, and describe complex business negotiations with perfect accuracy. Her mind was still sharp despite her physical deterioration. You know what I've learned in 86 years of life? She asked one evening as I carefully adjusted her pillows and checked her oxygen levels. What's that, Grandma? People show you exactly who they really are when serious money is involved. The ones who genuinely love you keep loving you exactly the same way. The ones who don't, well, they reveal their true evil nature. She was testing us systematically. She'd always been testing us, even before the dramatic inheritance announcement. Every conversation, every interaction, every request for help had been a small test of our character and motivations. That night, I heard careful footsteps in the hallway outside Rose's bedroom. I grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I'd started keeping by my bed and crept toward her room. The door was slightly open, and I could see a shadowy figure standing directly over her sleeping form. Marcus. He was holding a large pillow in both hands, positioned directly above her peaceful face. What the hell are you doing? I whispered harshly, stepping into the doorway with the bat raised threateningly. He spun around quickly, pillow still clutched in his guilty hands. She was having trouble breathing normally. I was just trying to help her get more comfortable. But Rose was sleeping peacefully, breathing normally and steadily. The medical oxygen tank was working perfectly fine, providing steady flow at the prescribed rate. Get out right now, I said, gripping the bat tighter with white knuckles. You're being completely paranoid, he said defensively, but he backed toward the door quickly. This whole stressful situation is making everyone crazy and suspicious of normal behavior. After he left, I installed a hidden camera directly in Rose's bedroom. What I captured over the next week made me physically sick to my stomach. Marcus had been coming into her room every single night, not to hurt Rose physically, but to whisper poisonous lies directly in her ear while she slept. Systematic psychological warfare disguised as concerned grandson behavior. "He's only here for your money, Grandma. He told Emma he can't wait for you to die so he can inherit everything and move to California. He's been stealing cash from your purse when you're not looking. He laughs about your war stories behind your back, calls them boring old lady rambling that puts him to sleep night after night, systematically poisoning her dreams and subconscious mind against me. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and cruel, designed to undermine my relationship with Rose while she was most vulnerable. Sarah's approach was even more medically sinister. She'd been systematically switching Rose's essential heart medications with completely harmless placebos, making her condition deteriorate much faster than natural. The pills I thought were helping stabilize her serious heart condition were just sugar tablets disguised as life-saving medicine. But what I discovered next made everything else pale in comparison. While going through Sarah's briefcase that she'd left in Rose's study, I found detailed architectural plans of the mansion, specifically highlighting structural weak points in the staircase and balcony railings. There were also printed emails between Sarah and a contractor discussing accident-prone modifications to the handrails in Rose's bathroom and bedroom. They weren't just planning to eliminate the competition, they were planning to stage Rose's death to look accidental, probably after she'd signed over power of attorney to Sarah. The emails revealed their complete plan. Sarah would gain control of Rose's assets through the power of attorney documents, then arrange for strategic accidents around the house. The inheritance competition was just a distraction, while they positioned themselves to take everything. I also discovered they'd been slowly poisoning Rose's mind against Emma and me through more than just Marcus's midnight whispers. Sarah had been forging emails and text messages, making it appear that Emma and I were constantly talking about Rose's money behind her back. She'd created an entire fake paper trail of conversations that never happened, planning to present them as evidence if Rose ever questioned their motives. The depth of their planning was absolutely staggering. They had backup plans for their backup plans. If the accident approach didn't work, they'd prepared evidence to have Rose declared mentally incompetent. If that failed, they'd arranged for Emma and me to be framed for elder abuse. They'd even researched private investigators who could be bribed to provide false testimony. But their biggest mistake was underestimating Rose herself and underestimating how far I'd go to protect the people I loved. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering additional evidence. I broke into Marcus's apartment while he was at work and found detailed floor plans of Rose's house with marked escape routes and timing charts. He'd been planning this for months, studying Rose's daily routine down to the minute. In Sarah's home office, I discovered a disturbing collection of research about inheritance law, elder abuse cases, and successful insurance fraud schemes. She'd studied dozens of cases where family members had successfully manipulated elderly relatives. There were printed articles about families who'd staged accidents and gotten away with it. Most horrifying was a detailed psychological profile she'd written about Rose, analyzing her weaknesses and triggers. Sarah had been studying our grandmother like a predator studying prey, looking for the most effective ways to manipulate and control her. I also found evidence that they'd been drugging the twins to keep them compliant. Jake and Luke's recent erratic behavior wasn't just stress about the inheritance. Marcus and Sarah had been slipping them sedatives to keep them docile and uninvolved. The twins had no idea they were being used as pawns in a larger game. The investigation led me to discover they'd already attempted to kill Rose once before. 3 months ago, when Rose had her fall down the stairs that everyone attributed to her weakening condition, it hadn't been an accident. Marcus had loosened the stair railings and Sarah had given Rose medications that would cause dizziness and disorientation. Rose had survived because of pure luck and my quick response in calling the paramedics, but they'd learned from that failed attempt and were planning something more foolproof this time. I realized they were escalating their timeline. The inheritance competition deadline was still weeks away, but they couldn't wait. Rose was getting suspicious, asking too many questions about the legal documents Sarah kept bringing her to sign. That's when I discovered their final plan. They were going to stage a home invasion gone wrong. Marcus had already hired criminals through his underground contacts, the same people who'd broken into Emma's apartment. The plan was to make it look like burglars had killed Rose during a robbery, with Sarah conveniently being the only family member with legal access to the estate. Emma and I would be framed as the mastermind since we were the ones living closest to Rose and had the most access to the house. They'd already planted evidence in my apartment. I found it during a search after becoming paranoid about their reach, but I had one advantage they didn't know about. Rose had been testing us from the beginning, but she'd also been testing them, and she was far more aware of their schemes than they realized. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. During what was supposed to be a routine family dinner, I walked into the dining room to find Marcus holding a knife to Emma's throat, while Sarah stood over Rose with a syringe. "You've been a problem," Sarah said calmly, as if discussing business. "Too curious, too protective. It's time to accelerate our timeline." Emma's eyes were wide with terror, and Rose looked genuinely frightened for the first time since I'd known her. "Let them go," I said, stepping into the room with my hands raised. "This is between us." "No, it's about $47 million, Marcus replied, pressing the knife closer to Emma's neck. "And you've been standing in our way." That's when I activated the live stream I'd set up on my phone. Every word, every action was being broadcast directly to the police station, where Detective Morrison was watching in real time. "You're making a mistake," I said, trying to buy time. "Rose isn't as helpless as you think." Sarah laughed bitterly. "The old woman can barely walk. What's she going to do?" That's when Rose spoke from her wheelchair, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I can do this." She pressed a hidden button on her wheelchair, and every door in the house locked automatically. Steel shutters dropped over the windows. The mansion security system activated, trapping everyone inside. "What the hell?" Marcus screamed, loosening his grip on Emma just enough for her to break free. "I've been preparing for this for months," Rose said calmly. "Ever since I realized what you were planning, the inheritance competition was just bait to make you reveal your true intentions." Police sirens were already approaching the house. Sarah lunged at Rose with a syringe, but I tackled her before she could reach her target. The needle went flying across the room, shattering against the marble floor. Marcus tried to run, but the locked doors trapped him. He turned on me with the knife, wild with desperation. "You ruined everything." We fought viciously, crashing into furniture and breaking priceless antiques. He was younger and stronger, but I was fighting for my family's lives. Emma grabbed a heavy candlestick and struck him from behind just as he was about to stab me. He collapsed unconscious as the police finally breached the security system and stormed into the house. Sarah was still fighting like a cornered animal, screaming about her rights and threatening lawsuits even as they put her in handcuffs. "You can't prove anything. This is all a setup." But we had everything on video. The live stream had captured their confessions, their threats, their attempted murder. There was no denying what they'd done. As the paramedics checked on Rose and Emma, Detective Morrison pulled me aside. "We've been investigating them for weeks based on your tips," he said. "But this live confession was exactly what we needed. They're looking at life sentences." The twins, who'd been found drugged and unconscious in the garden shed, were taken to the hospital. They'd been completely unaware of the violence, sedated to keep them out of the way during the final confrontation. Rose, despite everything she'd been through, insisted on making her final will changes that very night. With Mr. Peterson and the police as witnesses, she signed the documents that would secure Emma's and my future. "I want this finished tonight," she said firmly. "I won't give them any chance to challenge this from prison." The next few months were a blur of trials, media attention, and legal proceedings. Marcus and Sarah both received life sentences without the possibility of parole. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The recordings, the forged documents, the attempted murders, everything. The twins, once they recovered from the drugs, were horrified to learn what had almost happened. They'd been unknowing pawns in a game that could have killed their entire family. Jake immediately entered rehab, and Luke started therapy to deal with the trauma of discovering how close they'd come to being accessories to murder. 6 months after the trial ended, Rose passed peacefully in her sleep. Emma and I were by her side, holding her hands as she slipped away naturally, surrounded by love instead of the violence Marcus and Sarah had planned. Her final words were simple: "You showed up when it mattered most." The reading of the will was a formality at this point. Emma received $30 million and immediately enrolled in medical school to specialize in geriatric care. The twins each received $2 million, enough to rebuild their lives if they made better choices. I inherited the remaining $15 million, along with the mansion and all of Rose's business holdings. But more importantly, I inherited the knowledge that I'd protected the people who mattered most when they needed it. Emma and I used a large portion of our inheritance to start the Rose Foundation, dedicated to protecting elderly people from financial abuse and family manipulation. We also funded a legal clinic that helps families navigate inheritance disputes without resorting to violence. The foundation has helped hundreds of elderly people protect themselves from predatory family members and financial scammers. We've trained social workers to recognize signs of elder abuse, funded legal aid for seniors who can't afford attorneys, and created safe housing for elderly people who need to escape dangerous family situations. Marcus died in prison 3 years later, killed by another inmate who didn't appreciate people who hurt elderly relatives. Sarah is still serving her sentence, working in the prison laundry and writing letters to legal aid organizations claiming her innocence. The twins have both rebuilt their lives successfully. Jake is 5 years sober and works as a counselor for addiction recovery. Luke finished college and became a social worker, specializing in family crisis intervention. They visit Emma and me occasionally, grateful that we saved them from becoming accessories to murder. Sometimes I drive past the old Victorian mansion, now converted into a senior living facility through our foundation. Elderly residents sit on the wraparound porch playing cards and sharing stories, protected by security systems and careful staff screening that prevent the kind of abuse Rose almost suffered. Emma visits the facility weekly as part of her medical practice, treating residents who remind her of our grandmother. She's married now to a fellow doctor who treats her like the treasure she is. They're expecting their first child next spring, a little girl they plan to name Rose. And me. I learned that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about values, character, and the choices you make when faced with impossible situations. Rose left me more than just millions. She left me the knowledge that, when it mattered most, when evil was wearing the mask of family and love was being weaponized for greed, I chose to protect instead of profit. The real inheritance wasn't the money. It was the lesson that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds seem impossible.